an immortal monster that slaps! Before we hop in this character discussion on Arba, the immortal monster of a Magi, please do me a favor, drop your own thoughts on Arba in the comment section down below, leave a like, and subscribe if you haven't already. Now, let's get into it. What's up guys, Doug the Pencil here, and here we are to talk about Arba, the immortal monster. And I think she's fantastic, and arguably the most important villain in all of Magi. I know David counts, does David... In terms of our modern narrative, the most important villain? Nah, that's still not true. Whatever. I think she's the most important because she is the driving factor for a lot of our characters. From Aladdin to Hakuryu to basically the entire Ko Empire and multiple generations before that, and who knows how many other nations and people she affected. And that's all Arba, because she's a menace, and I love it. Here's the thing. Arba as a villain is really unconventional, and to be fair, we don't know Arba is Arba until, like, hold on, when does the Alma Torran arc start? Around 215 chapters into the darn manga, so that's almost 2/3, well, really about halfway. Nah, it's literally over halfway into the manga before we realize who the real big bad is. And the great thing as Arba as a big bad is the fact that she presents a challenge to our entire cast. Usually when you have a villain, they're usually just paired up to about one character usually. Like in a lot of other series, a character and a villain will have one dynamic. It's simply the one-to-one. No one else is really involved with it because the villain usually has main effects on one character, even if their effects last to the entire society. However, what makes Arba so great, at least in my mind, is unlike someone like Kasim, who really had the main direct relationship with Alibaba, and someone like Matal, who had the main direct relationship with Aladdin, you have Arba, who not only ties into Hakuryu, but due to her influence on the entire world and her forceful destruction of the old one, she has a direct tie into Morgiana. She has a direct tie into Aladdin because she killed Aladdin's mother. She's the whole reason that the Ko Empire is even as strong as it is, which makes her a main reason why Alibaba goes through so much suffering. And of course, you have the obvious implications with Hakuryu. She literally killed his older brothers because they were a threat to her, and that set Hakuryu down his entire path of vengeance. She basically ties in to all four of our main characters in one way or another through her heinous acts, and I think that's great. I love villains that are so deeply rooted into their respective world that even if you pluck them out from one root, even if you literally kill them in the case of what Hakuryu did to Gyoken, one of Arba's alternate names, she didn't die there. Her ideology, her message, her force, her villainy still rooted throughout the entire world, and I find that so cool. I love it when a villain just has their hands in so many different elements of a world that it feels like even if you take one of their hands out of one of the plots and you destroy that plot, they just keep going. They're such a massive integral presence of the world that you really can't remove them no matter how hard you try to remove the parasite. Arba embodies that perfectly because she's the cause of everything, really. She's the cause of the destruction of the new world. She's the reason Aladdin even showed up on the new world. She's the reason for pretty much our entire story. And I think that's great. And I know David's simply the reason for our entire story, but in terms of our actual present cast, David was much more I kickstarted it and I'm going to take all the credit at the end. He's put his name on the project, but Arba did the entire project. And that's just Arba as a villain and having so many roots in the narrative. What else I really like about Arba is the idea of her backstory. So Arba was a servant to Solomon. However, she was also directly groomed by David, which explains her deep, undying devotion to the idea of her father. And thusly, she believed that, oh, as long as I can see my father and I can listen to the voice that tells me what to do in my head, which has to be my father, I can be perfectly fine, I can live a completely satisfied life, and I'll do that the proper way. She also had morals. She had disagreements with what David was doing, and thusly she was willing to go against him. She was so happy with the resistance. She was a real figure to them that guided them. She was a guiding light. She was extremely smart. She was extremely experienced, extremely powerful. She was really a being on a different level compared to a lot of the other resistance members because of all she had done before that. However, due to her existence before the resistance, she couldn't follow Solomon as loyally as everyone else could. Sure, she attempted to. She kept calling him my lord. She didn't refer to him as a person that was truly equal with her. She always saw him as above due to his status. However, the moment Solomon gave her that little wrench of freedom, the moment that Solomon revealed to her that he wasn't fully in control, I feel like that's what sparked Arba's ability to not fully care about Solomon anymore. that ability that he said to use your own power to stop me if you need to, Arba took that to heart. She took that personally. And thusly, when Solomon makes his choice, when he decides to free everybody from the will of this darkening Ilallah, all Arba sees is their father, exactly the person that she's been preaching to, supposedly the person she had been listening to for all these years. Who knows how many years Arba has actually been alive, considering we know magicians can extend their life with magic, and we don't actually have an official age for Arba. We just know she's over 1,000. The thing is, after seeing all that, Arba finally got what she wanted. She got to meet their father. And then Solomon essentially murdered her father directly in front of her. And considering how unstable you can sort of tell Arba is, despite her extremely maternal nature early on from her existence in the Alma Torran arc, you can tell there's always something a bit strange about her. And I think that's good. I think Otaka-sensei does a fantastic job of establishing Arba as this almost disconnected person before you even get to the reveal of her snapping back and becoming the leader of all Thalmon. Because you can see it in how she kills David. She kills him with absolutely no regard. When Solomon was supposed to fight David, it was supposed to be this big bad battle. Didn't even matter. She just ran in, whoosh, instantly murdered my man and kept it moving. Arba always seemed naturally disconnected, and she was only really connected to the idea of her father. So when you realize that Solomon, what Solomon did was take Arba's entire existence, stab it, use its power, and then get rid of it. As much as I don't like what Arba did, I can completely understand why Arba snapped at that point, because she was probably already walking on thin threads. So you see her going through all this, and then you see the final betrayal, the death of King Solomon, the rising of the jinns, everything, the final war. And I wish we got more of that, I'm not even gonna lie. I wish we got more of Arba and Sheba's battle. But we see Arba, this guiding light for the resistance that was so perfect for everybody, fall to darkness. And this darkness is so ravenous that it not only consumes them as the resistance and as the new united of all the intelligent species, it consumes the entire world. Her creating the dark spot as a way to call back down her father and destroying the entirety of Alma Torran at the cost of her own existence is really the establishment of what Arba truly is. The immortal monster. That woman who fell from grace so drastically that she literally fell beneath the ground and went down into the darkness is so potent that it literally does not stop her. She believed that she had done it. She had destroyed Alma Torran, that was it, and her father was happy, only to see that Ugo said no. He basically made an entire new world. So to see Arba realize this and realize that Solomon's will was still being carried out somewhere else, it was obviously an insult to her. And once again, she took that personally and decided to destroy the entire new world that Ugo and Solomon had built. And the thing that I love about that is how her backstory directly feeds into her current ideologies as a modern villain. She realizes certain things about herself that other Althalma members just don't do. Like one, her entire process of giving birth to all her heirs within the Co-Empire. She realized through constant experimentation, through a constant existence of over 1,000 years, that to really manifest her true power, she needs to give birth to her own bodies. And through doing that, it shows how it relates to the idea of her past constantly tying into her present, which is hopefully going to help her in the future. So her building the entire Co-Empire was not just for the idea of, oh, I need a new body to mess with this world, but also I needed this new body to build up status within this new world. So within this new world, I can go on top of that and then use all the power of the dark root that I can manifest in this world to summon Father and destroy this world again, to spite Solomon and Ugo again. And I like that because Arba is one of the displays of a man becoming a monster, except the ultimate monster. The way that Arba, as we know her from Alma Torran, evolves into the Arba as we know her by the modern narrative makes perfect sense. And that's the scary part, because I can fully track Arba's line of falling, since I can fully track Arba's line of development, it makes perfect sense of how we got here. But the thing about how we got here is how much suffering and how much blood she's left in her wake. Because you can tell Arba has sort of disconnected. She's sort of de-linked from the idea of who she was due to the constant pestering of the voice in her head. And honestly, there's a question about the voice in her head. I've always wondered if it was actually David, because now the only person who seems to acknowledge the idea that the only person who seems to acknowledge any idea of Ilallah having any sort of sentience is technically Arba, only, and like Sinbad by a technicality. Like Ilallah wanted to create its own universe, but every other time anyone else referred to it, it was just a clump of power that happened to exist and also happened to do certain things sometimes. So I guess it could have been speaking to Arba, but in my mind, due to what we know David was doing, like assimilating himself with Ilallah, I always just figured that voice ended up actually being David, just constantly speaking to her. And the great thing I love is that we don't know. We don't have an answer to that. It could have just been Ilallah. It could have just been directly what the series was telling us. However, considering the voice disappears the moment David becomes a god, it seems very likely that it could have been David. However, regardless of that, that voice is what drove Arba to do all her actions. And speaking of her actions, the main thing I really like about Arba is how much of a menace she is and how much she pushes her species to its limit. Now, what do I mean? Arba is a Magi, and thus she's a menace, with magic, with combat, with everything. Arba is really what the perfect combination of about every single trait a Magi could be, amplified to 11. Literally, Aladdin had to cheat and learn the only magic that Arba herself couldn't learn in strength magic, and that's only because of his biology as being Solomon's kid and being a descendant of David. But literally, Arba was so powerful physically that she was the strongest in Alma Torran. I know the Fenilis exists, but as Morgiana says, Arba never fought the Fenilis, so we didn't know about that. And then you have the fact that she is so magically inclined that Hakuryu, a man with 2 Jin equips, I know he was debuffed by Phoenix, I know that, but also Hakuryu with 2 Jin equips, and on top of that, Judar, who was amped by absorbing all the Black Ruth, stood no chance against her magically and literally had to cheat. They had to activate an isolation barrier. And then even on top of that, once they activated the isolation barrier, she switched to her physical side and it was absolutely mollywopping the two of them. It literally was a battle to the absolute limit to the both of them. It was literally both of them fighting down to the very end. And she still technically won that fight. It was literally Judar just outplaying her at the very end, waiting behind a wall to trip her up and let her die. So Arba really won a fight against not just Hakuryu and Judar, but also the 2 extra generals, and she did all that while magicless. And then, of course, you have her entire fight with Yunnan, where she just shows that, yeah, Yunnan's a very powerful, experienced Magi, whose fangs apparently have not grown dull at the bottom of that great rift, but at the same time, it doesn't really matter to Arba, because Arba is just way more powerful, like absolutely monstrous in the sense that Yunnan literally destroyed a majority of her, but from her hands alone, she went, well, I'm back. Now it's time to rock you. That's the great thing. I love how Arba is such a powerful villain that no one really, like, to be fair, Arba lost, especially to Aladdin at the very end. Aladdin kind of mopped her up with her entire organization, which is one of the issues I have, but I'll get into that in a second. Arba is so powerful, and due to her being the same race as one of our main characters, technically since she's a human, she's the same race as all of our main characters to a degree, but the thing about that is she takes to the very limits of pretty much every feasible thing she could do as a regular human. She took her idea of her humanity to the limit on the physical side, in the sense that she was the strongest swordsman in Alma Torran. Once again, let's ignore the Fenilis. They weren't human. Look, they were cheaters. They're too strong. And then she was the strongest magician, magic-wise, basically outside of Solomon himself. And Solomon, once again, was sort of a cheat character who had access to the most broken magic in the entire universe. So you can't really blame Arba for losing to him and or losing to Aladdin, his descendant, who also had the most broken magic in the universe, the one magic that Arba couldn't learn. Apparently not. So we have this villain who is so well tied into the world that she's almost impossible to completely destroy. She's responsible for the entire current state of the world and the current state of the old world, which is its entire destruction. We have an extreme we have a trackable period of descendants into her madness, which we get to see throughout the entire series. And she has not only a fantastic design that matches up with the entire aesthetic of Alma Torran, but then evolves and changes depending on how she's fighting, who she's fighting, and where she is. But on top of all of that, we have a monster in full form, both in terms of combat prowess and as a character. Her madness is insane, and it's great to watch, and it's amazing to watch. Everything is great about Arba. Only issue with Arba, her ending. Here's the thing. As cool as it was to see Aladdin come in and absolutely take his left hand and backhand Arba into a different dimension, quite literally, because he removed her from her one viable host, but At the same time, I would have preferred a more pitch battle. Like, I'm not even gonna lie. Even if I knew from rip, due to how amped Aladdin was and how he basically bullied the entirety of Al-Thaman in that moment, the thing that hurt me the most is, like, Arba was our big bad. Like, sure, David, sure, Sinbad, sure, Ugo for a little bit. Sure, we had all these different characters that were technically our end games, but Arba was the end game. She was the game. Forget about the end. And to see her go out in what feels like such a meh kind of way, like, as cool as it was, like I say, Aladdin's final moments in that back part of the arc, or well, in the early part of the final arc, beautiful, great, love them. I just wish it was a more pitch battle. That's the only issue with me. That's Arba's one issue, because even her moments after that, thanks to David becoming a god, she loses all of her ability to hear the voice. And once Arba has no motivating driving factor, like any follower ever, once she lost the thing to follow, she kind of just became empty. She just didn't care anymore. And once again, that's a logical progression to her character. I'm perfectly fine with that, because it literally shows how dependent she was on Ilallah. If Ilallah didn't exist, we don't know what Arba would be doing. If that voice didn't exist, none of the series would have happened, because Arba just would have probably just chilled out, and then we wouldn't have Al-Thaman, probably wouldn't have anything. Unless Falon and Ethnon decided to just make Al-Thaman. But no, it wouldn't have worked as well, because Arba was such a pivotal factor because of her experience, because of her knowledge, because of her abilities, because of everything Arba was. And to see her sort of just give up and become a rather empty shell of a character after a while, while a little disappointing, I'll admit, I'm gonna cap, I was a little disappointed. It makes sense, because she lost everything, basically. All of her work, all of her thousands of years of existence were thrown away because of Solomon's descendant. So the one person she would have hated the most and wanted dead for the longest time is exactly what stopped her, because that's how it was supposed to go. She felt empty at the end, and I love that. It's this great cycle where we see this character who was a follower from Rip develop into this ultimate leader, and then this leader losing the thing that they were following into this empty character. And one of the things that I wish we got to see more of, if Magi ever got a sequel, but I doubt it, she's never getting a sequel, but if Magi ever got a sequel, if ever got a continuation, I would love to see what Arba's doing now. Because notably, Arba is still alive. She exists. She's just not a Magi anymore, because like the Magi system is destroyed. But the thing about that is, she still exists. She's just in a child form right now. Ugo gave her a new body. But now the question is, what's the deal? Where is she going now? What's the story of Arba now? Is she going to find a new passion? Is she going to go out into the world and discover new things to care about? We don't know. Is she going to get acquitted for all her crimes? Probably, because, hey, ain't no one going to stop her. But on top of all that, I just wish we got to see more of Arba, because she is one of the characters that we sort of end on. This is the same thing with Aladdin. I forgot to mention it in Aladdin's discussion. But Aladdin sort of has this open ending that Arba has, where they're both able to go in their own unique ways after all they've been through. And I like that a lot. I think Arba is a fantastic character, a fantastic villain, and a fantastic presence in the entirety of Monkey. What do you think about Arba? Please tell me your thoughts on Arba in the comment section down below. And thank you guys so much for watching. Please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is That Guy with the Pencil, writing off.